Plant spells were normally only for druids, which was a shame really. They had so many amazing uses. You could let them grow rapidly, give them sentience and even create portals between trees on the same plane. Wish made it possible for him. He intended to use trees, plants and fungi as his decoration, living furniture, food, guardians, doors, shifting maze, elevator and conversation partners. He never liked the idea of a cold and empty tower, only filled with grumpy wizards. Walking along the corridor he nodded towards the mushrooms which eagerly talked to him and wanted him to take a bite. These ones were poisons, but they swore not to him. He did not yet want to try out his clones, so he thanked them politely and moved on. Moving through many hidden doors, gateways, and passageways he finally arrived at the library. Only a few red velvet chairs stood at the bottom of 20-feet-high shelves full of books. Branches, leaves and droves of cherries gave the room a fresh and natural feeling. The branches extended from the shelves which seemed to have grown naturally in this shape. Luminescent plants and insects gave the illusion of sunlight streaming in from above. Ah, Mr. Argentarius. What a pleasure. Just now a new patch came in and I believe this would greatly interest you. A soft whisper, like the rustling of leaves, reached his ears. He could make out a face near the seating area at the center of the mighty tree. Thank you, Chief Librarian. He still felt a bit strange about giving the tree a title, but the spell clearly stated that the plants were only charmed for 30 days after being awakened to sentience. And if they held a grudge against you, well, good luck getting those books. So he decided it could not hurt to flatter them a bit. Say, could I have some of your wonderful fruits again? He tried to present his best caring boss persona. But of course, my lord. The tree moved an entire branch over and dropped a full pound into a wooden bowl. In the next few hours Argentarius tried to eat as many cherries as humanly possible while reading a book about the emotions of plants, which was a bit strange, given it was written by Natalie Cole from Indiana. His next stop was the new SSC, short for Scrying Surveillance Centre. It was his own CIA. How did he hope to compete with multi-billion-dollar, state-founded behemoths? Just by stealing, of course. A cacophony of sounds entered his ears as he entered the SSC, or rather his mind was invaded by many voices at once. Dozens of winged serpents flew towards him, wanted to be pet and told him eagerly about their discoveries. The creature named Kuatl, resembling a Chinese dragon with feathered wings, was a lawful good celestial that was created as a guardian and caretaker by the gods long ago. They could understand any language and spoke via telepathy. Also, and most importantly, they could cast the scrying spell once per day. The room was formed around a central tree which continually sorted the written reports handed to him by the Kuatl, and sorted them neatly inside his own trunk. A hive structure encompassed the rest of the room. Every celestial had its own cave with a crystal ball, worth 1000 GP, ink and paper. Scrying allowed them to spy on a person or place on the same plane of existence as them. Obviously they were targeting high-profile politicians and intelligence agencies. The spell only lasted for 10 minutes and could fail. But with the sheer number of flying snakes milling about, Argentarius did worry more about the fact that he had too much information to filter. One might ask himself, where did all these creatures of myth come from? Well, he cheated again, of course. Not with Wish, because that was part of the problem. You see, after a few weeks he had dozens of constructs just standing around and being only of use as doorstops. But after he got plants to do that, he snapped and just turned them into snakes. He could create one every day with true polymorph and it would become a real Kuatl, age, mate and everything. Only when hit with a dispel magic would they become constructs again. Dispel magic was quite common in other worlds, but fortunately wizards were normally not mad enough to create dozens of celestial beings with true polymorph. So Argentarius' entire future depended on not ever revealing how this one simple trick could fuck him royally. If the Kuatl were bored, they would search the web for anything related to magic, and if they had been discovered. Getting internet down here was surprisingly easy. Tom knew a few things about IT and had been able to set up fast and good Wi-Fi, at least in this one room. 300 feet of cable, SIM cards of all providers, and a router taped on top a tree had done the trick. A construct changed the extra large battery pack every few days. He needed to buy some solar panels. These days he kept a very close eye on the snakes. He had no idea if they would develop independence like real Kuatl would. His constructs were not capable of learning new skills or become more powerful, yet the Kuatl seemed to thrive, adapt and build real social connections with each other and the plants. They were very dangerous in large groups, as capable fighters and healers. Yes, and also immune to all non-magic weapons, which should include nukes. Not that he was inclined to try that one out. If he could make them his loyal servants, nothing in this world could stop him. He would declare them his emissaries, as they could also change shape into humans. Send them to deal with the pesky governments and their vain struggles. Even the temples of Azuth could be run by them. Level 9 spells were really too overpowered. Just the other day he had read only on a forum about what level 20 wizards did in their spare time. Apparently they hid from level 31s. There is always a bigger fish in the sea. A cold shiver ran down Argentarius' spine as he thought of the eldritch horrors waiting out there in the myriad planes of existence, and he would soon go on his first real dimensional travel. The next few months just flew by. He researched everything he could about planar travel, while building 11 hideouts. Of these 10 would become towers in the future. He chose the following cities based on his swallow understanding of geopolitics and a random list of the biggest cities: New York City, Vancouver, São Paulo, Lagos, Nigeria, Cairo, London, Moscow, New Delhi, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. The last hideout was to be in the Antarctic and meant to be his fallback line. He proceeded the same way he did in Tokyo, traveling per smoke and plane. Then he searched for a nice big lake or better reservoir and built his underwater base. All of them were now connected via the teleportation circle spell. Now he and his constructs could travel to each base instantly and without risk. Only a limited number of times per day and caster, of course. He intended for the bases to be self-sufficient. For that he had taken special care to befriend all the awoken plants and the creatures he created with true polymorph. They were mostly lawful and good creatures, as he dared not unleash others onto this non-magic world. Someday he would create his own wizard tower on top of them. The thought of having 10, 1-mile-high, world spires across Earth seemed very cool to him. But as there would be next to no way of hiding them forever and he needed massive resources to build them, he chose to focus on traveling to magical worlds next. And the most important part of that undertaking was to secure a way back home. If he got lost and had his 9th level spell slot ready, he could always return with Gate, but he'd rather not change into a drow matron every time. He had only 2 9th level spells in his book, yet with true polymorph he could turn into creatures which were able to cast other 9th level ones, such as the Queen of Dark Elves. He had no intention of cross-dressing every time he wanted to go home, so he made preparations to craft tuning forks. These items were attuned to the frequency of the world they originated from, whatever that meant. Even after days of research, he could only find vague instructions on how to craft them. Just taking a fork made of metal and calling it a day seemed too easy. The next day, he sneaked into the Hubei Provincial Museum and stood before the Sword of Gojian. How did Argentarius get in? Well, a short teleportation to Hong Kong, comfortable flight via plane, and then he just walked inside. He used vapor to fog the cameras up, switched the sword with his own fake, the one made with the transmuter's stone, and teleported into the Antarctic Circle. Deep inside one of the last glacier on Earth was his safest and most important hideout. Hundreds of feet of ice would keep anything short of a large meteor away from him. he had already prepared everything else beforehand and stored the needed items inside his demiplane. After he turned into an invisible stalker, a wind elemental, he departed and flew across nearly 1,000 miles across the Arctic desert. His goal was the magnetic South Pole. It just seemed like a fitting place to craft the tuning fork. Nearly 3 days later he arrived at his destination, on the shoreline near Dumont d'Urville Station, just a few more 100 miles off the Australian coast. He cast Mirage Arcane, made a large cave and went inside. There he opened a door to one of his demiplanes. Out came a number of his constructs who carried smithing tools and a mold. Itchy used true polymorph and turned me into an adult red dragon. Every goon of his took a few steps back. A huge dragon appeared, which just about fit into the cave. Argentarius folded his wings and ducked his head a bit. His deep voice resonated inside the improvised workshop. Take the sword of Gojien and put it in the crucible. The blade had already been separated from any non-metal part and cleaned thoroughly. Sadly, it had already started to tear and crumble. 2,500 years took their toll. The crucible was placed on top of the furnace and everyone positioned themselves behind Argentarius. Many people believe dragon breath comes, as the name implies, from the lungs. Yet as a matter of fact, they are vomiting the liquid out of their mouth. After a good minute, he decided that melting half the room should be enough. Licking his long fangs and dry heaving did not help, so he swore to never use the breath weapon again unless absolutely necessary. No wonder dragons always seemed so angry when you fought them. He carefully extended a single claw, slipped it in the handle of the crucible, turned around slowly and cast the molten bronze into the sand mold. Soon after he asked Itchy to dispel true polymorph. Next was going to be the most experimental part about the whole thing. Argentarius had read that any wizard could make a magic item if he knew the appropriate spell and cast it often enough. How that was supposed to work, he had no idea. His constructs and him just stood in a circle around the cooling tuning forks and continued to cast the plane shift spell into the metal. A few hours later San drew the short stick and was soon looked inside a demiplane. For days later he petted an eager Kuatl which told him about the news story, that a Japanese man had apparently been arrested inside the Hubei Provincial Museum but had managed to escape by unknown means. A few sending spells later he knew his plan had been a success. He now owned 9, if San found his way back 10, forks attuned to his own plane of existence. Now all he needed was to come up with some way to get out of this plane. Argentarius came up with 3 different ways to get to the other planes. The first was to ask the gods for help in acquiring a tuning fork of Toril, Exandria, or the plane of fire. Problem being that he did not want to depend on them too much and was not sure enough about the possibility of them seeing him as a threat to be eliminated. Second, he could summon Fae, Celestial, or Devils. Then get them to either bring him a tuning fork or tell him their true names so he himself could open a gate towards their realm. Again, he dared not fuck with the Devils or even the Fae. As for the Celestial, well, if he were contacted by a stranger and asked to enable him to invade your plane of existence, I'd be a bit worried and probably call Daddy Angel on them. Third, there was the infinite staircase, which was said to connect all realms and planes. Traveling it was apparently not that dangerous, compared to just jumping into portals or striking deals with unknown creatures. Once you were inside you could get anywhere in the multiverse in a few days. The goddess Saloon Palace, the Gates of the Moon, was said to be at the base. Only at full moon and when fog came from the waters surrounding the palace, would the staircase show itself. Saloon sent her own servants, the Lelendi, to guard the stairway. As both their alignment was chaotic good, it's notable that they hated fiends. He felt that he knew of some creatures that would get along well with them. Apparently they allowed anyone to travel there, but he needed guidance. Every door was looked by a puzzle of some kind and he had never been good at those. The design of the landing near a door should give hints as to the nature of the plane laying beyond. Luckily he only needed to find one place, the Nowhere Inn. There he could hopefully find a willing guide towards Toril. Now for the really difficult part. How on earth was he supposed to make the fucking stairs appear on Earth? Argentarius sat in his comfy valet chair and let himself be fed by walking mushrooms. Do you really have to jump inside screaming? He hastily grabbed for a cup of water as he nearly choked on a particular eager one. Eat us, master, eat us. The ones lined up before him had pleading expressions on their faces, well, rather their caps. Sitting back down, he took his book again in hand and obediently opened his mouth. A little shout of joy came from the little mushroom as it hopped into his mouth. Then it proceeded to shout screams of agony as Argentarius ate it. Awaking the bloody thing was one of the things he regretted most. After a few weeks he finally understood that the mushroom lived as kind of a hive mind, with its center in the roots. It had built its entire personality on making sure he, his master, was well fed. He felt as if he became some evil deity demanding sacrifices of his own children. Yet they got mad if he refused to eat them whenever he was here in London. Chief Librarian Peach. The trees could apparently now talk to each other, and after the other librarians got wind of the title, there was not stopping it if he wanted access to his books. Yes, master, I have not run away since you sat down. And this one was particularly cheeky. Have we any other books about the infinite or celestial staircase? He looked up at the giant tree with hope in his eyes. No new books sneaked in while you were present, master. It slapped a branch at his face. I believe the instructions were quite clear. Just perform a colossal act of art and the staircase will be drawn towards it. The thing was now getting on his nerves. I am the great archwizard Argentarius, guardian of this realm, servant of the god of spells, self-proclaimed. Came the commentary from the librarian. Why do I have to spend my valuable time creating paintings? Music or theater should also be fine. Not helpful. Well, why do you not just do it like with every other problem you have? Peach leaned forward and lowered its voice. A few books almost hit Argentarius and crushed an unfortunate mushroom who had no time to cry in agony. Cheat! He glared and contemplated making firewood. Then his face brightened up. He would show these bloody stairs what true dedication to bend rules and an army of himself could do. Now he knew how to leave, come back, and had even prepared some nice bribes for the art-loving Lelendi after a visit to the National Gallery in Westminster. Next was to figure out with whom he wanted to travel. Constructs were a must, but they had clear limits and it cost him nothing to polymorph them. The only question was into what? The strongest creature he could manage was the Red Abishai, a humanoid devil that resembled a chromatic dragon, or rather a dragonborn with wings. Taking Saloon's dislike for devils into account, he needed something nicer. Something that could ideally endear him towards other travelers and make him preferably not that big of a threat. 1 week later Argentarius had found out one more problem with his plans. The Call of Paradise. A living creature which wandered the infinite stairway and strayed from his party, was prone to find a wonderful and inviting portal. It led straight towards the person's greatest desire and was by definition almost irresistible. To give credit to the makers of that trap, there were certainly worse ways to disappear. He needed to create, no forge the perfect companions. If his polymorphed creations or even his simulacrum were to encounter an anti-magic field, they would be, well, he did not know what would happen. Yet he was not inclined to find out while facing a beholder's eye rays. Therefore his newest project was born, the Dragon Forge,